Yes. We have discussed in the past, in the last few lessons, we have discussed the history of the Jewish people after the destruction of the first temple. This destruction, of course, as we said, happened in the year 586 before the Common Era, and as you know, the first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And for the first time after so many generations, since Yehoshua, the disciple of Moshe, led the Jewish people after, of course, departing from Moshe, who passed away without having the privilege to go to the land of Israel, the promised land, Yehoshua led the Jewish people into the land of Canaan, and for several years the fights went on until total conquest. And then since then the Jewish people didn't know anything but the land of Israel. They were totally disconnected from the nations of the world. And they worshipped Hashem, and each one knew the real meaning of happiness. Ish tachat gafno v'tachat te'enato, as the book of Judges says. They lived, each one under his tree, his fig trees, which means there was opulence, there was prosperity. At the same time, they were very, very spiritual, and the people of Israel were the Jewish people that was meant to be when God proclaimed it to be His chosen nation. But then, up to the time of the prophet Jeremiah, things started to change. The Jewish people started to make mistakes. And then Jeremiah for 40 years kept on warning the Jewish people that the imminent destruction is coming. And nobody believed that the temple of God, the place which Hashem chose to make it His dwelling place, as you understand, initiated by King David himself and later on built by the King Solomon, nobody believed that this temple, where everybody practically could feel God, would be destroyed. But the ways of God are different than what we think. And finally the destruction came. And according to the understanding of our prophets, it's because of our sins. And God became unhappy with us. And He warned and warned and warned through the prophet Jeremiah. You see, in the time of the flood, centuries before, God gave the possibility to the people of the flood, the generation of the flood, to repent. He gave them 120 years. For the duration of that time, Noah was building his ark, at the same time trying to convince the people to change. But they wouldn't listen to him, so the destruction of the world happened, and the world was destroyed except for Noah and his family, and with the animals that they took with them in the ark. So Hashem does, before the destruction, He gives you the opportunity to repent. We can see the same. I mean, even in the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, even though God has already decided that this is it, the city of Sodom must be destroyed, and yet He heard His dialogue with Abraham, who said to him, what about if we find 10 righteous people in that city? And God says, if you find 10 righteous people, I will not destroy. What about 5? And at the end our sages say that even 1. He says, even if you could find 1. But not even 1 was to be found, and therefore the sentence was given and executed, and Sodom was destroyed. If you know a little bit of the Bible, you know also the story of Jonah. You know that God sent him, he was a prophet of God, and he sent him to the city of Nineveh in Mesopotamia to warn them that utter destruction is coming upon their country. And Jonah went to tell them, and the destruction was imminent. And yet, the people of Nineveh were smart, and they proclaimed the fast 40 days, and they repented, and the city of Nineveh was unscathed. No destruction. Even though practically the Gezerah, the verdict, was already proclaimed. And that's how it goes. The same thing also before the temple was destroyed, the first temple, Bet HaMikdash. 4 years Jeremiah kept on warning the Jewish people. And the Jewish people did not listen because they could not believe that the temple where God himself chose to dwell can be destroyed. And Jeremiah says, don't you be sure of anything, even the house of God. On the contrary, the house of God is the one that is more in jeopardy. Why? Because that's the way of God. If God doesn't want to exterminate the people, all of them, he will try to spend his rage, his anger, on his own house. Like our sages says, "Motzi et chamato ala etzim ve'ala avanim." He spends his anger on stones and trees. And that's why the temple was destroyed. And for the first time the Jewish people were dismayed completely, confused. For the first time many of them were disappointed. Is it possible? For the first time the Jewish people were taken away from their home to other countries, a non-Jewish country, idol worshippers. For the first time they saw that this life is not as they thought. They were taken to Babylon. And now our religion became extremely endangered because until now there was no problem. All you had to do to be inspired with the Judaism is just by looking at the temple, by looking at the kings of Israel, looking at King David. When you saw King David, everybody was infatuated with King David. The man was handsome and everything. The King David, at the same time, he was the most religious man. And in the night, everybody saw how he was spending the night, learning Torah and singing his praises to God. But no more. Even the kings of Israel, no more. When the temple was destroyed, the first temple, it was the end of royalty of the Jewish people. This royalty came back, of course, after the Jewish people came back 70 years after the destruction, when they were given permission by the king of Persia, Koresh, that is Cyrus, to go back to the land of Israel, which we believe was the son of Esther and the king Ahasuerus. And they went back to rebuild, but not all the Jews went back, only 50,000 Jews. But they started the rebuilding of the second Jewish Commonwealth with the building of the temple. And now, the era of the second temple. In the meantime, as I said, the Torah was in great jeopardy. What's going to be? And the sages of Israel, wherever they were extremely afraid that maybe the Torah is going to disappear. So they had to take up new decisions how to save the Torah and how to save Judaism. Because we have to believe, and we know it's a fact, that without the Torah there would be no Jewish people. What made us Jews is the Torah. In the ancient generations, exactly as it is with modern generations. Without Torah, there would be no survival. It's impossible to survive. If you don't believe it, all you have to do is check history and you will find out. It's impossible. Because Judaism is Torah. And the Torah is Judaism. Remove the Torah, there is no Judaism. There are many Jews today who make a terrible mistake thinking But as long as they are in the land of Israel, they don't have to be religious. And they don't understand that the danger again is very imminent. And thank God there is a great part of the Jewish people now going back to their religion, to their heritage. Many yeshivot are being built, and a lot of Torah is being learned today, like no other generation before the destruction of the temple. Throughout the last 2,000 years, the best generation in Torah is today. And yet this is the lowest generation, of course, in the level of the Torah and the greatness of the sages and so forth. So after the destruction of the first temple, if it was not for the organization that we call the Great Assembly, known in Hebrew as Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, the men of the Great Assembly, consisting of 120 illustrious rabbis and prophets, if it was not for them, the Torah would have disappeared and Judaism would have disappeared. Thank God, because of their new traditions, new explanations, with the appearance of the Talmud, which is the oral law, thank God the Torah was revived again, and we have many generations since then of greatness and Baruch Hashem glorious times, even though the majority of the Jewish people was not in the land of Israel, but rather in Babylon. But in Babylon, we must be grateful to the fact that in Babylon was the creation of the oral law. Of course, there was an oral law at the time of Moses. What do you think Moshe did during 4 years teaching the Jewish people in the desert, in the wilderness? He was not teaching them the same 10 commandments. He was teaching them the whole Torah with all its details. Only the details were transmitted orally. But those great teachings of Moshe and Yehoshua and the judges and the prophets and the elders, practically they were almost forgotten after the great destruction. So they were revived again by the men of the Great Assembly, and the leader of the Great Assembly was Ezra the scribe. And our sages said that Ezra was exactly like a new Moshe Rabbeinu. Indeed, without him, we would have been in trouble. So thank God again, the Jewish people is back again in the land of Israel. Then I'm talking about 2,600 years ago. Even though this was a different land of Israel, this was not anymore the land of Israel of before, when the Jewish people were the masters of the land. Now this was only an autonomy that was under the wings of some kind of big empire. Either it was the Greek Empire, and then later the Persian, the Babylonian Empire, then the Persian Empire, and then finally the Roman Empire. All these practically were in charge of the land of Israel. Only the Jewish population lived there as an autonomy. They had to pay taxes to the Roman government and so forth. So we even had about 200 years of new royalty, new kings. But those kings were not from the tribe of David, from Yehuda. They were, in fact, the family of the Kohanim, of the Maccabim, beginning with the great rebellion against the Greek Syrians, with Antiochus. Remember the story of Hanukkah? The great rebellion against them and the great victory of the Jewish people and the miracle of Hanukkah, of the oil. And that reinstated again the land of Israel as it was, more or less, the purity of the temple and so forth. And now we go into times in which there are great minds of the Jewish people, and yet, the temple now is in existence, the second temple is in existence, but the remnant, we are at the time of the remnant of the Anshe Knesset Agdola. And in Pirkei Avot, the second paragraph is talking about Shimon HaTzadik. The Shimon the righteous was the remnant, the last of the remnants of the great assembly. And he is the one who said the famous statement, Al Shelosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed, Al HaTorah ve'al Ha'avodah ve'al Gemilut Chasadim. The world stands on three great foundations. Upon the Torah, without Torah, as we said, the world cannot survive. At the same time, Al Avodah, in ancient time, Avodah meant the korbanot, the bringing of the sacrifices, which in fact was only a motivation to prayer and repentance. When people brought the sacrifices, they had to pray, and they had to do the vidui, the confession, and they had to purify themselves. So that means the avodah is a second part of what the Torah requests, which means the relationship, the personal relationship of every Jew with God himself. And without that, the Torah cannot really be that decisive in the life of a person, unless if you have also the tefillah. Today we don't have any more sacrifices because there is no more temple. But our sages made sure that the prayers, the three prayers of the day, Shachrit, Mincha and Arvit, would compensate for the sacrifices. And since then the Jew is meditating and praying to God through the book, the Siddur, and the prayers that were left that were composed by the men of the great assembly. And the third foundation that Shimon HaTzadik said, Gemilut Chasadim. Gemilut Chasadim means loving kindness, charity, helping one another, which means the relationship between human beings. So we have the Torah as the head of the Jewish people, the crown of the Jewish people, the mind of the Jewish people. Then we have the Avodah, which is the personal relationship of every Jew with God through his prayers and meditations. And finally, the third is also the relationship between people, between them, between one and his fellow man, which is necessary and essential for the survival of the world. If you could study Torah all your life and you could have relationship with God, if you don't know how to behave with people, society will crumble and you have no world. So obviously everybody should understand that it's only natural for the Jewish people and also for the non-Jews who believe in that without those three foundations, the Torah of the Jewish people, the Avodah of the Jewish people, as we have explained, the relationship with God, personal, as well as the relationship between people, society. And society is successful when there is charity, where there is good deeds, acts of loving kindness and so forth. Those three concepts are necessary and essential to the survival of the world, not only the Jewish people, of the whole world. And that's the legacy that was left by Shimon HaTzadik. Shimon HaTzadik lived in the time of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great, approximately 2,500 years ago, 2,400 years ago, Alexander the Great conquered the whole world. And after his death, prematurely, he left the world in the hands of two generals, Antiochus and the second Seleucus, who made two big nations who ruled the world. While, as we have discussed last time, Alexander was very nice and very kind with the Jewish people. He was so kind that the Jews in Jerusalem decided to call each one, any child who was born that year when Alexander visited Jerusalem, they called any child that was born was named after the name of Alexander, as a token of respect and, in fact, even friendship with Alexander the Great. In fact, as we have mentioned last times, Alexander the Great was extremely inspired by the appearance of Shimon HaTzadik, Shimon the Righteous. In those times we didn't call them Rabbi Shimon, because they were much more elevated than that. Like Moshe, we don't call him Rabbi Moshe. Of course we call him also Moshe Rabbeinu, but you don't give him a title before. That was the time of greatness. Like Yehoshua bin Nun, you don't call him Rabbi Yehoshua bin Nun. Or the great ones, or Eliyahu Navi, you don't call him Rabbi Eliyahu. All those times there was no such a thing as a title, because they were above titles. So that's why even Shimon HaTzadik, who was a high priest, one of the greatest figures, our sages say in the Gemara, so many stories and so many miracles happened in his time. And in the Bet HaMikdash itself, in the temple, they saw tremendous miracles just because of the great zechut, of the merit of Shimon HaTzadik. Of course, we are not here to study the Torah of Shimon HaTzadik, which is grandiose, but we are referring rather to the history of the transition of the Torah from one generation to another, and so far we stand with Shimon HaTzadik. Now we can begin the lesson. You mean one of them has some sugar?
Thank you.
Let me see. Very good. I hope the Sheakol before can cover this one. Anyway, so now we can begin with the one that comes next. Obviously, Shimon HaTzadik had many disciples, and I'm sure all of them were great. But he has to choose the best in order to transfer, to put him in charge of the Torah for all the generation. To transfer to him, to bestow upon him the merit to be the leader of Torah, to make sure that the Torah goes on. So far it has been done successfully, from Yehoshua to the Zkenim, the elders, to the Nevi'im, to the prophets, to the Anshe Knesset Agdola, the men of the great assembly, and then Shimon HaTzadik. And now, who was the greatest disciple of Shimon HaTzadik? You are going to be surprised to hear a name that is not Jewish. His name was Antignos, the man of Socho. Socho is a village mentioned in the book of Joshua, of Yehoshua. And apparently, the best disciple of Shimon HaTzadik was this man, Antignos. In English, it's Antigonus. You should ask me a question. Now, who is Antignos? Make no mistake about it. The greatest rabbi of his generation, approximately 2,300 years ago. And a little more. How could the greatest man, the greatest mind of his generation in Torah, and definitely also in good deeds and righteousness, how come he has a non-Jewish name? What happened? Number one, as it appears in Pirkei Avot, it shows that time have changed. Now, once the Jews started to adopt non-Jewish names, it shows that the Jewish people now is among the Goyim. It's not like it used to be before. But still, most of the Jews did not change their names. We know, for example, that one of the great praises of the Jewish people, as we find in the second book of the Torah, Ve'ele Shemot Bnei Israel, the book of Exodus. So it starts by saying Ve'ele Shemot, and these are the names of the Jewish people. Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zebulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Yosef. All this we know already. I mean, our sages ask in Rashi, why do we have to know again the names? To teach us that the Jewish people, even though they went to Egypt, they did not change their names, their Jewish names. Their Jewish names did not take any Egyptian identification. And that was one of the great traits of the Jewish people. And it is true that there are three things that the Jewish people never changed. They never changed their names, they never changed their clothing, and they never changed שלא שינו את שמם, שלא שינו את לשונם, their language. Hebrew was always a living language then. So you see that the Jewish people was praised by the fact that their names did not change. Of course today, what can you say about today? You have so many Jews who have became George and I myself, my name is Albert. Poor Albert, when I was born, I was given the name Abraham, of course. But then, because we lived in a French society, so they gave us Albert. It's still haunting me, my social security things, and what can I do? In order to change, you have to go to the court, you have to go, who has time? Jewish names were not easy to be adopted by Jews, because it is when you see a non-Jewish name by a Jew, you have to know that this is a great failure. Now don't be alarmed, because today, what can we do, it's already different. But you should know that when it started, when Jews started already to change their names in accordance with the society where they lived, it shows that the Jewish people is not anymore as it used to be in ancient times. It's obvious. Now I can give you an example. For example, Mordechai and Esther. Everybody knows that Mordechai, ho ho. But Mordechai itself, that was not his original name. His original name was Petachia, as we learn in Masechet Megillah. So why does he care? Mordechai is in fact a Persian name. Marduk. Why was he given why did he adopt the name Mordechai? Because he was a very important personality in the kingdom of Ahasuerus. He served as a viceroy, and to be in such position, to hold such position, it's impossible to have a Jewish name. Since all his intention to take that job, which was given to him being the head of the Sanhedrin, of the Jewish people which were in the diaspora, in the exile of Persia, so he had no choice. If he wants to help the Jewish people, he has to take the position. And in order to take the position, he has to also have a non-Jewish name. And by the way, then the same thing also with Esther. Esther, her original name was not Esther. Esther is Persian, Ashtar. And her original name was Hadassah. We already discussed those things. So the idea is that she is going to become the queen of Persia. She cannot have a Jewish name. It's obvious. So those are not to be blamed, because they were meant to have a non-Jewish name for the sake of the Jewish people, so that they can help the Jewish world. You understand? So why did I have to tell you this? To come down now on Antignos, the great disciple of Shimon HaTzadik. This man, in fact, was the greatest mind, at the same time, the most righteous man in his generation. The Talmid of Shimon HaTzadik. So how can he have a name of Antigonus? We understand that they lived in Greek society, in which Antigonus, being the leader of the Sanhedrin and all the Jewish nation, so he had to be in charge of many things that have to do with the Goyim, and therefore his name was changed to Antigonus. We do not know what was his original name. All I wanted is to attenuate the impression that Antigonus perhaps was a modern guy that changed his name. No, he had to do it only because of the Jewish people. But now let's see what was the legacy that he left us. Yes.
So he wasn't he wasn't given this name by his parents?
It's amazing, but this question will have no answer. because we have no sources that tell us what was his original. It's so mysterious, it's unbelievable. It's one of the cases in which we cannot say what happened. What made him adopt this name, or did he have it since birth? We don't know. All we know is that he was the disciple of Shimon HaTzadik, and in fact from his teachings that I am going to convey to you, you are going to see how great was his fear of God.
If you were changing your own name from from Jewish name to a non-Jewish name, why wouldn't he put something with more meaning into it than Antigonus?
Well, in order for me to answer this, you have to explain to me what is Antigonus. Unfortunately, I don't know. It's a Greek name. It reminds me only of a show, Antigona, which we used to study in class. In Israel, we used to study in high school. One of the books, the classic books that we studied was Antigona. And that's all I remember. Anyway, all I want you to know is that Antigonus was a great rabbi and very much God-fearing. What did he say? Al tiyu ka'avadim. Now I am going into the statement that he left us in the third paragraph of Pirkei Avot. Al tiyu ka'avadim המשמשים את הרב על מנת לקבל פרס, הבו כעבדים המשמשים את הרב שלא על מנת לקבל פרס. Which means, translation. By the way, that's not the only teaching that he had, because since he was the representative of the Torah, you could be sure that he had a big yeshiva, that he taught thousands of students. You could be sure that he gave us a lot of Torah. But Pirkei Avot brings only those points by which those leaders were shown into the world. In other words, how do we recognize Shimon HaTzadik? By saying, Al shelosha devarim ha'olam omed, al Torah ve'al avodah ve'al gemilut chasadim. How can we refer to Antigonus Ish Socho? By the most essential of his Torah. And his Torah, which was so great, projected a great philosophy, which is Al tiyu ka'avadim hamshamshim et harav shel al menat lekabel pras. Apparently, before I translate it, I'm going to warn you to be ready not to be disappointed until you hear the full explanation. Here is what he says. Do not be like the slaves who serve their masters in exchange for a reward. Rather, elahevu ka'avadim shemishamishim et harav shelo al menat lekabel peras. Rather, be like the servants who serve their masters without expecting any reward. That was the philosophy of Antigonus. And that's the only message that we find of him in Pirkei Avot. Which means we have to refer to this as a whole philosophy that has many thousands of details. For us, we will try only to explain what was meant here and to which kind of life it resulted to become. What was that it caused to the world? In fact, the teaching of Antigonus, this declaration, is the cradle of new religions in the world. Let me explain. He said, do not be like a servant who serves his master in exchange for a reward. Rather, serve without expecting a reward. Taken simply, this would be a very disappointing statement. What are you trying here to say? So you want me, of course what he means is, let us worship God without expecting any reward. What do you mean? There are many rewards for Torah. If you are a good Jew, what is the promise that is being extended to all of us? Huh? Don't tell me that the Jew would want to be a Jew by practicing all the mitzvot without expecting that at least one day he will gain Olam Abba, the world to come. That's the ultimate reward, right? As it says in Pirkei Avot, Kol Israel yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba. We all have a share in the world to come. And that's the biggest reward. There are many kinds of rewards. I can give you another example. I mean, to bring it down to the max, to the minimum. And that is in the Ten Commandments. What do we say? Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha lema'an ya'arichun yamecha. Respect and honor your father and mother, so you will have a long life. That means if you have a long life, that's your reward in this world. And our sages said that does not mean only in this world. It means also le'olam haba. It means you will gain eternal life. So that means we have a reward, right? But here, Antignos ish socho is telling me that I should serve God without expecting any reward. So I shouldn't expect to have olam haba, the world to come. I shouldn't expect to be resurrected among the people who will be resurrected at the time of resurrection. You know, it's one of the rewards. And you have to believe in resurrection. I hope you believe in that. Because those who do not believe cannot be resurrected. But one of the biggest foundations of Judaism is Tchiyat HaMetim. Don't we say 3 times a day in the silent prayers, Baruch Atah Hashem Mechayeh HaMetim? Right? Blessed be the Almighty that He will resurrect the dead. That means we have to believe in Tchiyat HaMetim. That's one of the biggest foundations of Judaism. Of course it's very difficult. I don't want to talk now about Tchiyat HaMetim because that would lead me in a different subject which I would like very much to discuss one of these days. But this is one of the fundamental beliefs that we have. If you don't believe in Tchiyat HaMetim, you are considered an atheist. Of course. Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead. What is the resurrection of the dead? You know what it means? It means that one day, after people will be buried in the ground, when God will choose the day, the ground will open, the graves will open, and we'll get up. It doesn't seem to be very much believable, right? So what do? Shouldn't we believe? But by the way, this has been discussed so much, and to tell you the truth, the theory of the resurrection of the dead is much easier to accept than any miracle that we see every day. Like birth of people. People are born every day, right? That's a miracle much greater than the resurrection of the dead. I'll tell you just in a second. The Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin tells us that the daughter of Caesar came to Rabbi Meir, and she said to him, you know, Rabbi Meir, I love you and I love your Torah, I love your people. She wanted to convert. But she said to him, there is one thing I cannot understand. Your Judaism seems to be professing the idea, projecting the idea of resurrection, that people are going to be resurrected after their death. How can I believe this? You mean people after they become dust, they will also become reconstructed again? She couldn't understand. So he said to her, what is so difficult to understand? I mean, think about 2 people, 2 artists. One who builds, he takes water and he builds with water. Can you build with water, Margareta? Can you take water and build?
You could freeze it.
If you freeze it, but that's not water anymore. That's already ice. But water as it is, can you build something with it? It's impossible. But if there was such a thing, you would immediately praise that man as a miraculous man, right? But what about mud? Can you build with mud or not? Of course you can. Dust. Take dust, accumulate dust, and you could build things. So Rabbi Meir said to her, every day we see people born. What is born? This is a creation. A creation. An extraordinary masterpiece that comes out every minute in life, in the world. And from where? How did it start? It started from a little drop. Liquid. And liquid caused the creation of people. That you accept, that you think it's normal. Of course, this is normal, this is natural. So wouldn't you be able to also believe, as this miracle is being performed every minute of the day, everywhere in the world. Wouldn't you believe the promise also that one day people will be reconstructed again from not water, not liquid, but from mud? So she said, she didn't think it this way. And that's it. Of course, that's not the main reason for us. This is only a mashal. But for us, it's a fundamental. It's one of the 10 foundations of the Jewish people. The Prophet says, "Befotchi et kivrotechem," that when the day will come when I will open your graves. Now, by the way, would you think that this never happened before? By the way, it did happen. In the Bible, if you know Bible, then you know that, if you know the story of the Atzamot HaYeveshot, skeletons that were reconstructed and they became again people because of the blessing of God. That was at a certain time when this happened. And you know what the Talmud says? That some of the rabbis declared that they are descendants of those people who were reconstructed again after just being bones that were on a little mountain. Now, don't you think that this is a fantasy that I'm telling you? It's Bible. So if you believe in Bible, that's what the Bible tells us. And you know, the Gemara says that Bnei Betera, says the great rabbis of Bnei Betera, they say we are descendants of those people upon whom the miracle of resurrection was performed. Now why did I go to the case of resurrection, since it does not fit now with the lesson tonight, but I have to tell you that one of the rewards that we expect, and that's a great reward, by the way. Apparently you should ask me, I have no choice, I have to explain a little further this matter. Apparently you should ask me, why do we need resurrection of the dead? That the body should be. When we die, we go to the world to come as souls. We are spiritual. And being spiritual, that doesn't mean that you are nothing. It means that you have a body with different energy. The same body, the Zohar HaKadosh says. The same body. Same duplication of the body. That's the picture. You know, when you take a picture, well, that body itself is there. Only it has the different energy. And that cannot die. But Tichiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, requires that the body that has served us is going to come back again. Why is it necessary? What do you mean? Aren't we there? Suddenly we are going to be again in the grave. What's going on? Of course there are many mysteries here. That we cannot pretend that we know all the secrets. But it's one fundamental belief that we have. And according to the great sages such as Rabbi Saadia Gaon and others, it's one of the greatest rewards. To go to heaven is a reward by itself. It means life goes on in a different form. But the perfection of God is that the body who has served us should come back also. Does it make any sense? No? Again, to go to heaven and to deserve paradise and everything is great. Especially if you know more about it. But apparently that there is even a greater reward. That after you're there, you're going to join. Your soul is going to join again with the body. And that will be a tremendous pleasure. And that's why not everybody is going to be meritorious enough to have Tchiyat HaMetim. Only if you are meritorious and if you believe in it. Anyway, let's stop right here and just say what we said before. Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, is one of the rewards that we expect. So Olam Haba is one reward. But also people expect rewards in this world, being rich, being healthy, being that. So many people, they do the mitzvot, they are religious because they want to have the good blessings. Those people are in a lower level because people should not really be Jewish just because you are afraid that something will happen to you. You know, like all the religions. That's not what God meant Judaism to be. Judaism is supposed to be regarded as a splendor, as a gift by itself. Antigonus, the man of Sochos, said, "Do you know what is Judaism?" And now I'm going to tell you the secret of his words. It's not that he meant to say that there is no reward. He did not say do not expect any reward because there is no reward. There is great reward for every single mitzvah that you do. Even just, you become rich even if you do properly just the washing of your hands. The Talmud in Masechet Sotah says, you want to become rich? Make sure you do properly the washing of your hands before you go to eat. Netilat Yadayim, the smallest mitzvah, and yet it gives you riches, because riches is nothing for God. But still it is a reward. So reward, there are so many rewards around us, no question about it. And Antigonus did not mean to tell the people that don't expect any reward because there is no reward. He meant to say, hey people, be on a high level. I want you to realize who you are. Do you know what is the meaning of being a Jew? He meant to say. Please, stay with me. Just for this point. Do you realize what is to be a Jew? We are all born Jews. We take it for granted. Very nice. I'm a Jew. I take a cup of tea. Great. But do we realize what kind of good luck we had to have been born Jews? I say, to my humble opinion, there is only one good way how to discover how good it is to be a Jew. Just from what's happening today, would you like to be a Muslim? I tell you, I prefer to die than to belong to a religion like this. They are willing to kill. Kill. That's all they want. But any philosopher with good sense would say, to belong to this barbaric religion, what is there? Thank God. The least is, thank God I am a Jew. There are some Rabbanim who say that every Jew should get up in the morning when you wake up and you find out that I am a Jew, he should dance. He should sing. Would you want to be a Christian? Of course, some people might say, why not? What's wrong with a Christian? That's not that. If you explore their teachings and their Bible and their things, you will find out, please. All you have to do is make up your mind to study 1 year, 1 good year of Torah. And then you discover that, Habibi, oh no, for no price in the world shall we relinquish our position as Jews. To be a Jew is just marvelous, great. God gave us 613 mitzvot. He gave the Goyim only 7. And the Goyim are destroying the world. We have 613. Anyone would say, that's not fair. They have only 7 obligations. We have 613 obligations. Well, that's not how it should be regarded. It should be regarded as they have only 7 privileges. We have 613 privileges. Do you realize how we are confronting each other? By a number of 613 versus 7. That's the difference between being a Jew and any other non-Jew. I know what I'm saying requires more elucidation, more discussions, more deliberations. I'm not saying no. But I just want you to discover what you yourself know by instinct. Your own conscience tells you every day. Otherwise, why would you be a Jew? It's not easy to be a Jew. I'm talking to those people, last week, let me tell you something, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Did you ever, nobody is Israeli here, Marinat Israeli. Do you remember Tommy Lapid? Of course. Rahamana litzlan v'shem reshaim yirkav. Like it says, Shlomo HaMelech said, whenever you mention the name of a wicked man, I have to say, Shem reshaim yirkav. All his life, he was a big man in Israel. He was the Supreme Court man, he was a deputy member of the Knesset, he was a minister of the law. But he was also the champion of the non-religious people against the religious people. I mean, he persecuted the Jews, the religious Jews, to the maximum. Every night he lacerated the skin of every Jewish guy, every Torah learner. He hated the Torah scholars. He hated them. What didn't he do to take away from them any kinds of privileges that they have? A man was known, even by the non-religious, it was known that Tommy Lapid was a real exacerbation of any kind of philosophy. This is too much. In fact, he himself was asked, why do you hate them so much? He says, my father was religious. And after the Holocaust, he says, I hate anybody who was... He hates the religious. He hates especially the Talmidei Chachamim, the Torah scholars. He says anybody who studies Torah is a fool. And even Rabbi Akiva, before he became what he became, he also hated the Torah scholars. You remember? Rabbi Akiva says, "Mi ten li talmid chacham v'ana shchenu kachamor." Give me one Torah scholar, I will bite him like a donkey. So that means before he knew anything, so he hated the Torah scholars. The truth is that because he was a genius, but he didn't have any Torah, so the vacuum caused him to be inflamed against anyone who knows. And true knowledge is only the knowledge of Torah. That's why when he became the great man and he gave his heart, he became the master of the Jewish people. He gave his life for the Jewish people. But Tommy Lapid, this guy, he hated the Jewish people all his life. Last week he passed away. I'm sure many people said, big deal. But you know what he said? Before? He asked, a day before he died, he wrote it, he said, I want you to give me a funeral, a religious funeral. I want you to say Kaddish for me. This was the strangest thing to hear. A man who declared himself an enemy of the Torah, before he dies, I want you to give him, he wanted us to give him a good funeral with Kaddish and the 7 days, everything. I had the time I would tell you the story of Elisha ben Avuya, that even though he became an atheist, but before he died, Rabbi Meir says, I think that my Rebbe has repented. So maybe he repented also. I don't know how much it will help him, but maybe. But the point is like this, that you see the Jews are, many Jews, they like to be religious because they are afraid. Alright, but that's not Judaism. Real Judaism is, number one, explore it to the point to discover how great it is to be a Jew. For that you have to learn Torah. You have to discover the great wisdom that is endless wisdom by studying Talmuds and tractates that have absolutely no relevancy to today's society. And yet you see there is such science and such chokhmah that cannot be just given by men. It has to have some kind of the hand of God. But anyway, to be a Jew, even the nations respect us through their hatred. Why they hate us? Because they respect us. Because they know we are better. I did mention many times before, but even some of the great philosophers, the French philosopher, what's his name? I forgot his name. Sartre? Jean-Paul Sartre. And he says, we have to admit that we hate the Jews. We can't help it. He's right, by the way. The Talmud says it's a natural law that Esav will hate always Yaakov. So he says we must admit that we hate the Jewish people, but we must admit also that the reason we hate them is because they are superior to us, which means they are better than us. We are not saying that we are better than anybody. We are saying only that we are Jews. We have received the Torah. What a privilege. What a privilege it is to do every mitzvah. What a privilege to be a woman who goes every month to the mikveh. The Goyim don't know anything about this. But the Jewish queen goes every month to the mikveh to purify herself after 2 weeks. That's something that while some people might laugh at, some people might deride that, but after total and deep exploration, they would realize that it is a great privilege. I mean, to be a king is not easy. Even when it is very hot, the king has to wear his attire as a king. So that's the price to be a Jew. But you realize the keeping the laws of Niddah is one way how to make you recognize your own religion. Putting tefillin every day. There's no non-Jew who puts in his prayer anything. We put something on us that shows our royalty. Whether we understand it or not, it does show that we are different. What about kashrut? We keep we don't eat non-kosher things. While this might be considered a big inconvenience, but at the same time, if you have a mind that is sincere, you would immediately admit that it is a great privilege. We are not like them. That's the reason why what can we do? We don't eat what they eat. We eat only a certain diet that the Torah has prescribed for us in order to retain our very special nature. So Antignos, the man of Socho, said, hey, listen, Chevre. You think that of course there is reward everywhere. But do not do Judaism because there is a reward. The reward, don't worry, it will come. In every sense. But that's not the point. I want to convey to you, he says, the idea that to be a Jew, it's such a great privilege that I don't need any reward. That practically, because the reward is to be paid. You do something, you are paid. Right? But what about if somebody will tell you, can you become a king? Will you demand a monthly salary? Huh? Are you going to ask how much you will pay me? He gives you a crown of gold. And he says, now you are the king of this country. As a king, are you going to say how much you will pay me, sir? That would sound ridiculous. That's exactly what Antignos Ish Socho was trying to convey to his disciples. All his life he was teaching this philosophy. Adore Hashem. Love Him. Fear Him. See how awesome He is. And realize that it is such a privilege to be called His servant. But what kind of servant? A servant who would disdain a reward. So He did not come to take away from us the reward. He came to show us that we are so lucky that we don't even need any reward. While all the disciples of his generations, they understood that this man was the greatest man. And what he was trying to teach is what we call Yirat Shamayim, the fear of God. But not the fear like you fear a lion or like you fear the bee. It's like when you see an awesome image of something and you stay like this astonished. Like it says, Shamayim mesaprim kevod elu ma'aseh adam magid harakia. Look at the sky, look at the earth, look at everything that is around you. And see whom are we serving. So Antignos says, when you realize what is the meaning to be a Jew, then you have to be so glad to practice Judaism, even if there is no reward. Unfortunately, while all the generation grew on such a level, that's the highest level, by the way. If you want to know what is the highest level of being religious, that's the level, without expecting rewards. Which means without having questions. Many times people are enthusiastic with God and religion, but once they have a hard time, they become immediately disappointed. But that's not the point. Antignos Soto was teaching his generation that it does not matter what happens. Because what happens in this world is not important. Bad or good, take it. Because we are so privileged to be Jews that we don't care what happens. Two people in his big yeshiva understood his philosophy the wrong way. One was named Baitus and the other one was Tzadok. Those two people, disciples of Antignos, when they heard this philosophy constantly by Antignos Socho, because they were not very much into Yirat Shamayim, into the fear of God, and at the same time they were very smart, very advanced in science and many things. They discussed between them. They said the Rebbe, the master, is probably trying to convey to us the message that there is no reward. Which means he's trying to tell us to be good, to live very nice in this society, to worship a God, but at the same time don't expect anything. There is no world to come, there is no world of souls, there is no resurrection, there is nothing. It's no reward. And they decided that this is what their master meant. Because it's impossible that he would continuously be teaching this philosophy without believing that there is no reward. And they went out from the yeshiva and they built their own institutions. They started 2 organizations. One called the organization of the Baitusim, after the name of the leader Baitus, and the other one is the Tzdukim, Sadducees. Those 2 organizations, the first one, Baitus, at the end they became one, because most of the Baitusim disappeared, and now we were left with the Sadducim. The Sadducees were part of the Jewish people, and they succeeded to practically involve in their movement of atheism. They believed in the Torah Shebichtav. They believed in the written Torah, but they did not believe in the oral Torah. Based on the teaching of what they thought is the teaching of Antignosis Soho. And that's how we have the creation of what? Of one of the worst organizations that we had in Jewish history. The Tzdukim, the Sadducees. Unfortunately, they took 10% of our nation, and among them the richest people and scientists and so forth. This became the group that we call Tzdukim. Those were the people, I'm coming to you, those were the people that caused us tremendous and outrageous damage. They are the people because of whom, in fact, some of them were even big rabbis that turned out sour later on. Even one of them was a high priest, Yochanan, Kohen Gadol, and he himself became a Sadducee after serving in Bet HaMikdash for 8 years. That's a known fact. And now that was the time. The Sadducees went on till almost the destruction of the temple with the appearance of Monsieur Jesus. That was the time when they went together with him. They are the ones, the Sadducees, damaged so much our religion that caused the destruction of the second temple, the Christianity in the world, because the influence of the Christians among the Sadducees is that the Sadducees practically became Christians, and now they help the Christians, and little by little they disappeared totally. As you know, it became the movement of Christianity, which took them 300 years to realize that they were not, in fact, Jews no more. Did you know that, by the way? It's a fact in history that the Christians, when they started the movement of Christianity with Jesus and Paul of Tarsus and all the disciples of Jesus, they were still adamantly after being declared as Jews. And they kept also Shabbat. Only through the teachings of the disciple of Jesus, Paul, they went to the pagans and conveyed to them Judaism their way, without having to obligate them to many kinds of, such as Brit Milah, circumcision, and kashrut, because the pagans could not accept those things. So Paul said, just join us, don't worry. You don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. And little by little, for 300 years, Christianity called themselves Jews. Only 300 years after Oto Aish, after their God, Jesus. So then the church, when it was established, the first generation of the church by Constantine, the first pope, when they declared that Christianity is no more Judaism, and that's when they changed Shabbat to Sunday. because they themselves realize it's not Judaism. All this was with the help of the Sadducees, which anyway, because they did not believe in the oral Torah, disappeared completely. In fact, according to one of my teachers, Rabbi Avigdor Miller, he says, one of the good points that we have, because of the destruction of the temple, I mean the second temple, when it was destroyed, we had a few gains. One of them is that we got the Talmud Babli, the Babylonian Talmud, in extraordinary amount of learning. But at the same time we got rid of the Sadducees. For the first time, there said no more Sadducees. After the destruction of the temple, we were destroyed indeed, but at least no more Sadducees in the ranks of the Jewish people. But did you see how all this terrible tragedy happened? Because of two disciples who did not understand the full intention of their great and revered teacher Antignos Ish Socho. This is a very important lesson, by the way, to remember. Usually rabbis do not dedicate so much time to Antignos Ish Socho here, but I tell you, to my humble understanding, this is one of the most marvelous teachings that we have to understand Judaism as it is. That's Antignos Ish Socho. So Be'ezrat Hashem, the next lesson will be more quicker into the Pirkei Avot. We will explore some new things together, and I hope to see you again learning. Yeah, you asked me a question.
Rabbi, the Rambam, when he went down to Egypt, there was a group in Egypt called the Karaites.
Yes, that's something else.
Were they similar though?
No. There is a similarity in the fact that the Karaim is asking about 1,000 years later, after the time of the Sadducees, we had the Karaites. And those Karaim, they were, in fact, they called themselves Jews. They believed in the written, the Karaim, they wanted to believe only in the book. That's why we call them Karaim. Karaim comes from the word Kara, Kra. Kra means the psukim, the verses of the Torah. They did not want to believe the teachings of the Talmud. So the truth is, his story is Karaim, while resembling a little the Sadducees, but the Karaim were more humble, and yet they were extremely detrimental to the Jewish people. If it was not for the Rambam, for example, Maimonides, who pursued them, and he sent letters all over the world, especially to the Yemenite Jews, they would have taken a terrible part, a chunk of Judaism. But thank God, little by little, in Egypt, at the time of the Rambam, the Karaim were very powerful. But little by little, they disintegrated. And even today, there are some Karaim, but nothing really significant. Yes, quick, I have to go.
So Tzadok spent his whole life learning from Antignos. So he learned Torah Shabbat, the oral law.
This teaches us, by the way, that it's possible that sometimes 1% can sometimes go astray from the teachings even of the greatest men. This happened. I mean, it happened in the history of the Jewish people. That sometimes a guy, Hashem wants it this way, that the free will remains intact by everyone. Yes.
So then, in the end, what did he say, that it doesn't apply, or it's not true, the oral law? He just totally disregarded?
He disregarded that part which is brought in the Talmud, because the Torah shebichtav, the written Torah, does not talk about reward, except a few places like kabed avicha ve'emicha, as we said. But the Torah, watch that the Torah does not talk at all about olam haba, about the world to come. And yet, everything in our life is about the world to come. I mean, without the world to come, why even bother? You understand? But the Torah doesn't talk about things that have nothing to do with this world. The Torah does not. Can you find the word neshama in the Torah? You cannot find the word neshama, soul. Did you know that, Marina? You cannot find the word neshama in the Torah. Impossible. Only in the Talmud. You cannot find also the word Tichiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, except allusions to that, hints, as such as Yashir Moshe, where does it say as Yashir Moshe, Mikan Tichiyat HaMetim in the Torah? It's a long story. But the Torah does not talk about the Torah does mention Gan Eden, which means paradise, but just as a Garden of Eden that was at a certain time, at a certain place in earth. Aside from that, The Torah does not talk at all about things that have to do with outside this world.
So how did Tzadok keep the commandments, which were not explained?
He kept the commandment as we see in the Torah. He kept the commandment.
There's no tefillin description. There's no description. Of
That is true, but he did. I have no idea how how they kept the law of tefillin. I assume that they kept the law of tefillin properly according to some historical exhibits that shows that the Jewish people always kept the law of tefillin properly, except the Karaim. What is the difference with the Karaim? That the Karaim, they translated the words of the Torah in a different way. They says, "V'haya leot al yadcha ultotafot ben einecha," which we put on our forehead, right? The tefillin, and that's the totafot ben einecha. The forehead is between the two eyes. But what they says between the two eyes means that you have to hang them somewhere that you could see them with both your eyes. That's what the Karaim, how the Karaim explained that. And by the way, among the Karaim there were some great people also. But thank God, we don't have to bother anymore about them.
Who are the Shomronim?
The Shomronim is a different story. Allow me to tell you about the Shomronim next time. Because the Shomronim is just a small group. I mean, they are still today around. In Shechem you find them, and somewhere in those places. But the Shomronim, they do have a Sefer Torah, but it's all a joke, big joke.
Are they part of other?
They are somehow like the Karaim, but they retain more the idea of the Arabs rather. But they are a very, very, very small religion in total solitude, with some traditions that they are folkloristic. That's it. But there is much more to say about the Shomronim, even though the idea itself and the subject itself is not to be respected that much. Okay, Rabotai.